They are not ignoring you. They are responding to the version of you you're living as changed state, and the message changes instantly. You did not click this because you are curious. You clicked because something inside you knows this connection is unfinished. And I tell you now, nothing is broken, nothing is lost, and nothing is delayed. What you call waiting is simply the moment before realization. If you stay with me through this entire message, you will not only understand why your SP will text you and confess their love, you will feel the shift where it becomes unavoidable. Do not listen casually. Listen as one who is about to remember their power. You are not waiting for a text. You never were. Waiting is only what it looks like when you do not yet understand your position in the arrangement of things. The truth is far simpler and far more confronting. You are causing the message by the way you occupy yourself inwardly. Nothing moves toward you by chance. Everything moves by direction, and direction is given by attention. Most people believe attention means effort. They think if they think harder, affirm louder, visualize longer, something will happen. But attention is not strain. Attention is acceptance. It is what you quietly agree is true when no one is watching you, not even yourself. The moment you agree inwardly, movement begins outwardly, though you may not see it at once. You see, the world does not respond to what you want. It responds to what you are conscious of being. If you are conscious of absence, you experience delay. If you are conscious of being remembered, contacted, desired, communication arranges itself without your permission. The phone is not deciding. The other person is not deciding. Consciousness is deciding, and you are the one occupying it. The reason waiting feels heavy is because waiting assumes power is elsewhere. It assumes that something outside of you must change first. But the moment you understand that attention is causation, the burden lifts. You realize there's nothing to wait for because nothing has ever been missing. There has only been misplaced awareness. Think of how effortlessly things appear in your life when you do not question them. You do not wait anxiously for the sun to rise. You do not wonder if gravity will work today. Why? Because you assume them. And what is assumed never struggles to appear. It arrives as a matter of course. Communication works the same way. When you give your attention to silence and label it rejection, the silence obeys you. When you give your attention to absence and call it distance, distance remains loyal. But the moment you shift attention from what you fear to what you know, the entire scene begins to reorganize. Attention is not looking at the phone. Attention is the inner posture you take toward yourself. Are you the one who is hoping to be chosen, or the one who expects to be reached? Those two states produce entirely different worlds, even though they may look similar for a moment. You may say, but I haven't received anything yet, and I tell you, yet is not evidence, yet is simply the interval between assumption and appearance. You are not delayed, you are in transition. The movement has already begun the moment you changed where you placed your awareness. You must understand this clearly. The other person feels what you consistently feel about yourself in relation to them. If you feel secondary, optional, uncertain, they experience hesitation without knowing why. If you feel central, valued, and secure, they feel compelled to move toward you, again without knowing why. They will call it a sudden urge, a thought they could not shake, a feeling that came out of nowhere. But it did not come out of nowhere. It came out of you. Waiting ends when you stop negotiating with reality and start occupying it. You do not ask reality to send you a message. You live as though the message is natural, expected, ordinary. And what feels ordinary never resists expression. Notice how your body feels when you imagine being the one who is constantly thought of. There is no tension there. There is no reaching. There is calm. That calm is power. That calm is the state from which movement flows. You are not meant to chase signs or analyze timing. Timing is simply the echo of certainty. The more natural it feels to be contacted, the faster the world reflects it. Not because you forced anything, but because you removed resistance by withdrawing attention from doubt. You do not need to convince the other person. You only need to stop convincing yourself that you are waiting. The moment you release the identity of the one who waits, the role dissolves. And when a role dissolves, someone else must fill the new script you have written inwardly. And if you listen closely, you will discover that nothing in your world speaks first. Everything answers. The world is forever responding to a conversation already taking place within you. That conversation does not require words spoken aloud. It requires only agreement. What you silently accept as true about yourself and about another becomes the script they feel moved to follow. Most people believe communication begins when someone reaches for their phone. That is a misunderstanding of cause and effect. The message is sent long before the fingers touch the screen. It is sent in the quiet moments when you speak inwardly about what you expect, what you assume, and what you allow yourself to believe. The outer message is merely the echo of the inner one. You're always talking to your SP, whether you realize it or not. You speak when you imagine how they feel about you. You speak when you replay old conversations. You speak when you anticipate what they would say if they reached out now. And most importantly, you speak when you decide who you are in relation to them. These inner dialogues are not harmless thoughts. They are directives. If inwardly you say they don't know what they want, they feel confusion. If inwardly you say they miss me but hesitate, they hesitate. If inwardly you say they want to talk to me and don't know how to begin, they search for a reason to begin. They experience these impulses as their own, unaware that they are responding to a state you have been occupying. This is why effort fails. You cannot override a dominant inner conversation with occasional affirmations. The mind does not respond to what you repeat. It responds to what you believe. And belief is revealed by the tone of your private speech. Is it anxious? Is it pleading? Is it resigned? Or is it calm, familiar, and certain? The moment your inner conversation shifts from questioning to knowing, from wondering to expecting, the outer conversation follows naturally. You do not have to script every word they will say. You only have to decide the nature of the exchange. Is it loving? Is it open? Is it honest? When that decision is accepted inwardly, the details arrange themselves. Understand this: people speak to you from the version of you that you hold yourself to be. If you see yourself as someone who must chase clarity, you receive mixed signals. If you see yourself as someone who is chosen and valued, clarity comes without asking. Your SP does not need instructions, they need alignment. This is why you must become aware of what you say inwardly when nothing seems to be happening. Do you complain silently? Do you argue mentally? Do you rehearse disappointment? Each of these is a message being sent, and the world is obedient. It does not judge the message, it simply delivers it. You may believe your thoughts are private, but there is no privacy in consciousness. Every assumption is broadcast, every accepted idea is felt, and the other person responds not to your words, but to the state from which those words would naturally come when you inwardly hear them saying, "I miss you," and you accept that as natural. Something remarkable occurs. You stop waiting for proof. You stop checking. You stop preparing for disappointment. And in that absence of resistance, expression finds its way. The inner conversation must be one you would have if the desire were already fulfilled, not exaggerated, not dramatic, ordinary, familiar. The way you would think if there were no doubt. When your inner dialogue becomes calm and matter-of-fact, the outer dialogue loses its drama as well. You are not trying to make something happen. You are allowing something already decided to reveal itself. And the revealing always follows the acceptance. The moment you stop arguing with yourself, the world stops arguing with you. This is why silence on the outside means nothing if there is harmony on the inside. Silence only persists when the inner conversation remains unresolved. But when inwardly you settle the matter, when you decide without strain that communication is natural, silence has no purpose left to serve. Your SP does not wake up one day randomly choosing words. They wake up responding to a feeling. That feeling was cultivated by you, sustained by you, and accepted by you. And once accepted, it must find a voice. And once you understand that, you will no longer measure your power by clocks, calendars, or notifications. Time has never been the authority people believe it to be. Distance has never weakened a thing that was assumed to be true. Silence has never cancelled the decision made within consciousness. These are appearances, not causes, and assumption stands above them all. People suffer under silence because they interpret it incorrectly. They look at it and declare that nothing is happening, that something is wrong, that they have been forgotten. But silence is not absence. Silence is simply the interval required for an assumption to work itself through layers of belief. It is delay before obedience, not denial. The moment you assume something firmly, reality must rearrange itself to agree. Rearrangement takes place invisibly first. Thoughts shift, feelings rise, impulses form, resistance dissolves. And only after this inner movement does the outer expression appear. Silence exists only while this rearrangement is underway. If assumption were weak, time would defeat it. But assumption is stronger than time because time itself is an effect of consciousness. If assumption were limited, distance would interfere. But distance is irrelevant to a state. Consciousness does not travel. It simply is. And wherever it is accepted, effects appear. The mistake is to watch the clock instead of watching the self. When you look to time for reassurance, you place authority where it does not belong. You begin to think it's been too long, or if it were going to happen, it would have happened by now. And in doing so, you unknowingly give life to delay. Time does not delay fulfillment. Doubt does. Silence does not block expression. Questioning does. The world is not withholding from you. It is waiting for consistency. It is waiting for you to stop revising your assumption every time you glance outward. Consider how quickly things move when you are certain. Notice how fast a response comes when you expect it naturally. There is no strain there, no calculation. Why? Because you are not checking time, you are occupying a state. And a state, once occupied, must externalize. Distance works the same way. People say we are far apart, as though miles could interfere with consciousness. Yet you think of someone across the world and feel them instantly. You remember someone from years ago and feel them vividly. Distance has never separated awareness. It has only separated attention. When you assume connection, connection persists regardless of location. The body may be elsewhere, but the impulse remains. And impulses demand expression. They do not need proximity. They need permission. Permission is granted when you stop believing separation has power, silence only fry. Tens those who believe the outer world leads. Once you know the inner world commands, silence becomes neutral. It no longer speaks against you. It simply marks the space between cause and effect. And that space collapses the moment you stop filling it with doubt. You must understand this deeply. The world cannot disobey a sustained assumption. It may appear slow, it may appear still, but it cannot refuse. What feels like resistance is often adjustment. What feels like stagnation is often reorganization. If you remain faithful to an assumption, even when nothing appears to move, you will discover that movement was never absent. It was simply not yet visible. The seed does not announce its growth while underground, but it is growing all the same. Silence tempts you to interfere. It invites you to check, to react, to revise your belief prematurely. And every time you do, you interrupt the process. Not because the desire disappears, but because you introduce contradiction. Assumption requires loyalty, not force. When you hold an assumption without anxiety, without urgency, without negotiation, time bends around it. Events line up naturally. People feel compelled without explanation. Words arrive without planning. And when they do, they feel obvious, even inevitable. You were never meant to fight silence. You were meant to outgrow it. The moment you stop treating it as evidence and start treating it as transition, it loses its power to disturb you. And what no longer disturbs you no longer delays you. Assumption stands when appearances waver. It does not ask permission from circumstances. It does not retreat because nothing seems to be happening. It knows that obedience is the only possible outcome, because the decision was made at the level where causes are born And when obedience takes place, it does not arrive with strain or struggle. It arrives with ease. This is where many misunderstand the nature of confession. They imagine confession as something that must be forced, provoked, or extracted through effort. But love does not confess because it is pressured. Love confesses because it can no longer remain contained once resistance dissolves within you. Confession is not an act of courage on their part, it is a release. It is the natural overflow of a state that has been allowed to mature without interference. When you remove resistance within yourself, you remove the only barrier that ever existed. The other person does not suddenly become brave, they simply become aligned. Resistance is subtle, it does not always appear as fear. Often it appears as overthinking, as replaying conversations, as wondering whether it will happen, as preparing yourself for disappointment just in case. Each of these keeps love compressed, unspoken, restrained, not because the other person chooses silence, but because the state you occupy does not yet permit expression. You must understand that people speak freely only where they feel inward permission, and that permission is granted by the version of you that you accept yourself to be. If you secretly believe you must earn love, confession feels risky to them. If you believe love must be proven, confession feels premature. But if you accept love as natural, inevitable, and safe, confession finds no reason to hide. The outer confession mirrors your inner allowance. When you stop resisting the idea of being loved fully, openly, and without conditions, others stop resisting the urge to say so. Resistance always belongs to the self first. The world merely reflects it. This is why effort delays confession. Effort implies that something is being pushed against. Effort suggests opposition. Love does not move through opposition. It moves through openness. The more you try to make it happen, the more you confirm inwardly that it is not yet allowed. And what is not allowed inwardly cannot be expressed outwardly. Notice how different it feels when you imagine them confessing effortlessly, as though it were obvious, overdue, almost casual. There is no tension there, no urgency, no drama. That feeling is the state in which confession occurs naturally. It does not feel like an event. It feels like truth finally being spoken aloud. You are not meant to wait for a perfect moment. Moments arrange themselves when resistance is absent. The other person does not calculate the right words. Words arise when feeling has space to breathe. And space is created the moment you stop guarding yourself against possibility. Many hold back inwardly while asking for movement outwardly. They want confession, but they fear its implications. They want love, but they fear vulnerability. This inner conflict produces delay, not because the desire is wrong, but because the signal is mixed. The moment you become internally settled with being loved, something shifts. You no longer scan behavior for proof. You no longer interpret silence as danger. You no longer prepare responses in advance. You simply expect honesty because honesty feels normal to you. And what feels normal must externalize. Confession does not come to surprise you. It comes to match you. It meets you at the level of certainty you have reached within yourself. When you no longer doubt your place, others no longer doubt what to say. They feel safe to speak because you are safe to receive. This is why love often confesses when you least expect it. Not because you stopped wanting it, but because you stopped resisting it. Expectation without tension creates an opening, and through that opening, truth flows. You must allow the idea that they already know how they feel. They are not discovering love, they are acknowledging it. And acknowledgement becomes inevitable when there is no longer any inner argument against it. When resistance disappears, nothing needs to be forced. Silence loses its function. Hesitation dissolves. Words rise naturally to the surface, not as a decision, but as a necessity born of alignment. And as that alignment settles, something deeper comes into view. You begin to see that words never come to you independently of the self you are being. People do not speak to who you wish you were. They speak to who you assume yourself to be. Your self-concept is the filter through which every message is formed, toned, and delivered. You may think the other person chooses how they speak, but choice is not the right word. They respond, they echo, They mirror the identity you consistently occupy when you think of yourself in relation to them. If inwardly you see yourself as someone uncertain, they speak with uncertainty. If inwardly you see yourself as someone who must be reassured, they offer crumbs of reassurance. But if you see yourself as someone who is secure, valued, and expected, their words rise to meet that level naturally. This is not about arrogance or pretending. It is about honesty at the level of consciousness. Who are you being when no one is watching? Who are you being when you imagine them thinking of you? That version of you is the one they encounter, even if they cannot explain why they feel the way they do. Self-concept is not an affirmation you repeat. It is a position you live from. It is revealed in what you tolerate, what you anticipate, and what feels normal to you. If it feels normal to be questioned, you will be questioned. If it feels normal to be pursued, pursuit follows without effort. You may say, but they have always spoken to me a certain way. Of course they have. They have been faithful to the version of you that was active at the time. People are remarkably consistent in reflecting the state they are given. Change the state, and consistency takes on a new form. Notice how you speak to yourself after an interaction. Do you analyze tone? Do you search for hidden meanings? Do you replay what you said and what they might have meant? That inner behavior reveals a self-concept that expects uncertainty, and uncertainty, when assumed, must be echoed. When you occupy a different self-concept, something quiet but powerful happens. You no longer brace for words. You no longer decode messages. You no longer wait for validation. And in that calm, communication changes character. It becomes clearer, warmer, more direct, not because the other person decided to improve, but because there is no longer a version of you that invites confusion. People can only meet you where you meet yourself. They cannot rise above your self-definition, nor can they fall below it. They will attempt to match it instinctively. This is why trying to change another without changing self is exhausting. You are asking for an echo without changing the sound. As your self-concept shifts, even silence feels different. It no longer threatens your identity, and because it no longer threatens you, it no longer persists. Silence feeds on insecurity. When insecurity is absent, silence loses its purpose. When you assume you are chosen, words reflect choice. When you assume you are desired, words carry desire. When you assume you are respected, tone adjusts without discussion. You do not need to ask for better treatment. Treatment reorganizes itself around the self you present inwardly. This is why confession feels natural when self-concept is stable. The other person is not suddenly revealing something new. They are aligning their expression with the version of you that no longer doubts its place. Confession becomes simply appropriate. Do not concern yourself with how to change the other person's language. Concern yourself with the identity you are sustaining. Ask yourself, not aloud but inwardly, who am I being right now? And answer honestly. That answer is what the world is responding to. The moment you stop seeing yourself as someone waiting to be chosen, conversations shift. The moment you stop seeing yourself as someone who must prove value, words soften. The moment you stop seeing yourself as someone who could be replaced, reassurance becomes unnecessary. You do not command people with force. You invite responses with being. And being is effortless once it feels true. The most powerful change you can make is not in what you imagine them saying, but in who you are when you imagine being heard. As self-concept settles into certainty, communication follows suit, adjusting its tone, timing, and honesty to match the inner position you now occupy, because there is no other place from which they can speak to you. And once that inner position stabilizes, behavior changes without effort. You do not instruct yourself to stop checking. Checking simply loses its attraction. The urge fades because the question it was trying to answer no longer exists. You are no longer asking whether something will happen. You are resting in the quiet knowledge that it already is. Checking is not a habit of curiosity. It is a habit of doubt. Every glance at the phone, every refresh, every silent question of has it happened yet is a confession of uncertainty. And uncertainty, once admitted, ask the world to pause, not to punish you, but to stay consistent with what you are assuming. Knowing feels entirely different. Knowing does not rush. Knowing does not demand proof. Knowing does not negotiate with time. It settles. And when you settle, reality moves. Urgency is the language of someone who believes power is elsewhere. Certainty is the posture of someone who knows power is within. The world responds to posture, not pleading. It aligns itself with the one who is calm, not the one who is anxious. You may notice that the text always seems to arrive when you are occupied, when your attention has shifted, when you are no longer monitoring the outcome. This is not coincidence. This is alignment. In those moments, you are no longer contradicting your assumption with anxious observation. You are allowing the assumption to complete itself. Checking interrupts the process because it keeps you identified with waiting. And waiting is a role. The moment you release that role, there is nothing left to delay. The scene has already been set inwardly. The actors simply take their places. Certainty does not mean pretending you do not care. It means caring without doubt. It means desire without desperation. It means expectation without tension. And that state carries authority. It commands without effort because it does not argue. You do not need to tell yourself to be certain. Certainty arises naturally when you stop revisiting old conclusions. Every time you recall past disappointments, every time you rehearse what went wrong, you quietly reoccupy the version of yourself who expects delay. When you release those stories, certainty emerges on its own. Notice how certainty feels in the body. It is grounded, it is steady, it does not rush ahead of itself. It assumes follow-through, and because it assumes follow-through occurs. The text does not arrive to reassure certainty. It arrives because certainty no longer needs reassurance. The world always moves last. It responds to the state you have already occupied. When urgency leaves, command enters. Urgency says, I need this to happen so I can feel okay. Certainty says, I am okay, therefore this happens. One chases effect, the other stands in cause, and cause always wins. This is why trying to distract yourself rarely works if it is done with the intention of forcing results. That is still checking, only disguised. True release happens when you no longer feel incomplete without confirmation, and that feeling cannot be faked. It must be assumed. The moment you know, truly know, that communication is natural, expected, and inevitable, you stop monitoring its arrival. And in that absence of surveillance, the pathway clears. You do not notice it happening because you are no longer looking for it. Certainty gives permission. Urgency withdraws it. When you are urgent, you are saying inwardly that the outcome is not secure. When you are certain, you are saying the matter is settled. The world cannot argue with settled. You may find that certainty feels almost boring. There is no thrill, no anticipation spike, no emotional charge. That boredom is not lack of desire. It is fulfillment taking root. And fulfillment externalizes quietly. The more ordinary it feels to be contacted, the more ordinary it becomes for the world to contact you. Extraordinary effort produces resistance. Ordinary assumption produces flow. Certainty commands because it does not seek approval from appearances. It does not ask silence for permission. It does not negotiate with time. It stands as fact. And facts do not wait to be confirmed. They are confirmed by their persistence. As you stop checking, you are not giving up control. You are reclaiming it. You are stepping out of reaction and into authorship. And from that position, events no longer feel random. They feel responsive, timely, and aligned with the knowing you have already accepted as true. And from that position of authorship, you begin to recognize the final and most decisive element in this entire movement, feeling. Not emotion stirred by imagination, not excitement borrowed from hope, but the quiet, settled feeling of fulfillment. What you feel now is not a rehearsal. It is the cause. And what you cause inwardly must be spoken outwardly. Words are not born from thought alone. They rise from feeling. People say what they feel authorized to say, what feels consistent with their inner atmosphere. And that atmosphere is shaped not by them, but by the state you are occupying when you think of yourself in relation to them. If you feel incomplete now, conversation later will reflect that incompleteness. If you feel fulfilled now, conversation later will confirm it. Fulfillment does not wait for permission. It creates permission. When you feel whole, loved, and secure without needing a response, you remove the necessity of asking for anything. And what is no longer asked for must be given. This is the reversal that most never grasp. They wait for words in order to feel secure. But security felt first produces words effortlessly. The feeling always precedes the statement. The inner state always dictates the outer expression. Feeling fulfilled now does not mean denying desire. It means satisfying it at the level where causes operate. It means letting the desire complete itself inwardly instead of suspending it until someone else speaks. The moment you do this, you are no longer dependent on the outer world for confirmation. And the outer world, having lost its role as validator, rushes to mirror the state you have assumed. You must allow yourself to feel what you would feel if the conversation had already happened. Not dramatically, not exaggerated, simply naturally. How would you think of yourself? How would you carry yourself? How would you remember the silence that once existed? That feeling is the state you must occupy. When you feel fulfilled now, you stop rehearsing what you will say. You stop anticipating what they might say. You stop bracing for outcomes. And in that stillness, the script writes itself. People cannot withhold words that align with their emotional environment. When the feeling is present, expression follows. When the feeling is absent, expression hesitates. This is why forcing communication never works. It tries to reverse the order. It demands expression before feeling. And life does not operate that way. Feeling is the womb of speech. What is felt deeply enough must be said. And what is felt consistently enough becomes unavoidable. If you feel loved now, you no longer seek reassurance. And because you no longer seek it, reassurance arrives freely. If you feel chosen now, you no longer analyze behavior. And because you no longer analyze, behavior aligns clearly. If you feel valued now, you no longer fear loss. And because you no longer fear, connection stabilizes. The feeling does not need to be intense. Intensity belongs to wanting. Fulfillment belongs to being. A quiet knowing outweighs emotional highs. A calm sense of completion carries more creative power than excitement ever could. When you feel fulfilled now, you are no longer preparing for a future moment. You are living from a completed one. And the world has no choice but to catch up. This is why the words often come unexpectedly. Not because they were spontaneous, but because you stopped waiting for them. You had already received them inwardly, and what has been received inwardly must be echoed outwardly. You are not imagining words to make them happen. You are feeling a state that demands words, and that demand is silent, steady, and irresistible. The outer conversation will always match the inner conclusion. If you conclude inwardly that you are loved, the conclusion will be spoken aloud. If you conclude inwardly that you are secure, security will be voiced. If you conclude inwardly that you are chosen, choice will be declared. Feeling fulfilled now removes the need to ask later, because asking belongs to the one who feels incomplete. When you are complete, life volunteers its confirmation, and it does so naturally, quietly, and with perfect timing, because it is not responding to a request, but to a state already lived as real. And now you must see clearly all of this. Every text, every word, every confession is not outside of you. It is a reflection of what you have allowed yourself to be. The moment you occupy the state of being chosen, desired, and loved, the world has no choice but to respond. Silence, distance, hesitation. These are illusions that vanish when you stop negotiating with reality and start living as the one already received. Understand this. Nothing moves faster than the certainty you carry within. No effort, no pleading, no forcing is required. The law is simple yet absolute. What you assume, what you feel, and what you occupy inwardly shapes every action, every word, and every thought directed toward you. So release doubt, release urgency, release the habit of checking. Stand firm in your self-concept. Feel fulfilled now. Expect naturally. Know without question. The text, the confession, the acknowledgement you seek is already compelled to appear, because the universe responds to the state you hold, not to your waiting, your fear, or your desire. Remember always, you are not waiting for love. You are commanding it. Your inner reality dictates the outer. Your assumption shapes their expression. Your fulfillment now ensures the confession later. Nothing else matters, and everything else must follow.